Good afternoon, everyone. We're in the zone. Rich Sutter, Pete Coles. It's a beautiful September day out there. Absolutely fabulous in New England. And we're all ready, fired up to go. We did make a slight management change here. We'll see how it goes. Everybody saw me a little fired up last week, attributed to too many Mountain Dews, possibly. So this week I've switched off to ginger ale. We've kept Pete on the Mountain Dew, and we'll see if it has any better effect. We're in the zone. We're really excited to be back with you, and we are really, really excited to be talking about basketball and the upcoming basketball season. That's what we do. We're all about hoops. Now, before we go, we have a segment of the show that we call Feed 'em Fish, and we like to do it as our intro to the show. And today, again, we've talked about this a little bit, and now we want to fully announce in the zone as a prophecy as much as it is a show, because we illuminated this on the show. We told you this might be coming, and now it's on our doorstep in the sports world. And what I'm alluding to right now is gambling with NCAA players, gambling on their own games.
Ooh.
With DraftKings and some of the other affiliate organizations that are out there. I'm not blaming the gambling organizations. States have legalized it. People have set up legal houses for it. But what you have, the most compelling charge that they have is that they registered falsely in these accounts because they didn't use their own name, obviously, and then started to have bets go through there. Unfortunately, a lot of the bets were on their own games.
Wow.
And so we have 15 players from Iowa State and Iowa, mostly football, one basketball, a wrestler. I'm not sure how that got in there, but all involved to the level now where they have been through the court system. And they're going through the court system, most of them as indicted persons in an ability to conceal their identity, and certainly now, although I don't know if they have legal issue as far as what the United States law and code might represent, but they certainly now have an NCAA issue. Some of them will receive lifetime bans. Some of them will receive suspensions. Some of them will have mitigated circumstances. But nonetheless, this is not good. And there's a reason why you're not hearing about it nationally. There's a reason why, is because people predicted this would happen and nobody did anything about it, and now it's happened. And this is what I'm going to say to In the Zone fans and to everybody out there who's involved in this world of sports and who loves sports, loves basketball, and really, really loves it for the game, for the actual game, for the actual participation in the competition. What happens now is, extrapolate that number out, Pete. They have 15 players that they found.
It's the tip of the iceberg.
It's 100% tip of the iceberg. If you extrapolate that number out, what if it's 25%? What if it's 35%? So this is disastrous if it turns out to be at that level. It's an absolute disaster because there's no way that those players can remain in uniform. There's no way that those players can now continue to participate in any NCAA institution if they gambled on their own games.
Even if they were good enough to leave the NCAA, would any pro team want to pick them up?
I think,
and the answer is probably no.
Well, the answer to that is, how good are they? And I don't know that there's a whole lot of big names out here, but what happens when that does happen? So what we're talking about here is a really small cohort of people. Maybe none of them are draftable athletes. Maybe they're just the 69th guy on the team, and he just placed a couple of bets innocuously. Maybe he doesn't even play, so didn't have impact on the game. But at the end of the day, they sign something as NCAA athletes which says we won't do this. They sign something that says we're going to be bound to this. And so I don't know how you would now turn around and allow those players to compete. So what if it's 30% of the whole thing? What happens to sports on the college level?
Well, does that solve your reorganization problem? Because they're not going to have enough teams to fill out all these conferences?
I think they're not going to have enough players immediately. Yeah. And what happens is the players will get thrown under the bus, and they'll just replace them. Things will stay. If people are looking for reform from the people who are benefiting from these monstrous contracts, if people are looking for reform from them, I'll tell you the last time it happened. Rin Tin Tin was a puppy, and Moby Dick was a guppy. That's the last time that reform came from the people who are financially benefiting from this thing. That's Feed 'em Fish for the day. We talked about conferences last week. We're going to do that as well because we didn't do the Atlantic 10 last week, and we did promise to pick up on that, so we're going to start with that today with the Atlantic 10 basketball scenario for the upcoming year. UMass Minutemen locally in that group. And also, there's some Atlantic 10 action happening in Springfield as well that's going to be, I believe, in the Mass Mutual Center, where my St. Bonaventure Bonnies are coming in to Springfield to play. I'll be really excited about that. And there's some other really good teams. UMass is going to play in that foursome, so you'll have 2 Atlantic 10 teams. And then I'm not sure of the opponents right now, but I think they're fairly of an upper level opponent. I don't think it's somebody that's of a comparable opponent. I think it's going to be some good basketball.
Is this a revival of their Christmas series? They used to do it years ago.
I think it's not at Christmas though.
Okay.
But it might be a revival of that at a different time because they found Christmas might not have been the optimal time. But it's going to be exciting because you'll have 2 A10 teams in there, and you'll have UMass in there, which is a good local draw. But then you're also bringing in 2 pretty good teams. I'll try and find out who they were. Okay, but we're going to jump right into this. And Pete, we're going to do Goodman's Top 25 today.
Okay.
Are you ready on that graphic?
I believe I still have it, yeah.
Okay, so let's just get through the A10, and then I took up a list, and it's going to take a few minutes to go through, but I also took up a list this week because I was just wondering about some of this stuff, and I put down a list of the top 10 high school coaches that I thought I had seen or been exposed to in my time. I mean, there's a lot of great high school coaches out there, but I hadn't really been exposed to all of them. And again, when you compare high school coaches, there has to be a bell curve on every high school coach because to coach out in New Mexico isn't the same thing as coaching in Queens, New York. They're different. And so to accumulate 1,000 wins out in New Mexico, obviously a wonderful accomplishment. But where I grew up in New York, I know how hard those wins were to come by. And so there's a bell curve in some of that, I believe. And so I did a couple of lists and different things like that of the high school coaches, top 10 that I had. I did a list of the top 10 college coaches, and I also did some NBA guys as well. So we'll go through that as well right after we do the A10. And then we'll go to Goodman's top 25 because we've been threatening to do that for weeks.
Yep.
And I like Goodman, and I think he's solid. So they have Dayton picked at the top here. This is the coaches poll from the A10. And if you really want to get a good idea, because a lot of these polls right now they are all over the place. There is a very difficult time given the portal and given the NIL, very difficult time, because I asked a friend of mine just recently, how do you think the Bonnies will do this year? I asked Tom McElroy, a buddy of mine, what do you think? And he goes, I can't tell. I don't know what everybody has. All of the movement makes it impossible to really know. So when you're talking about preseason polls, and we're going to talk about that right here, you have to take that with a grain of salt. And if you really, really wanted to get a good estimation in your preseason poll analysis, what I like to do is I like to take several of them that I feel are credible and then add them all up and divide them. So you come up with an average. And so if one place, because I've seen, let's go back to my guy, St. Bonaventure, I've seen them listed second in a poll. I've also seen them listed 10th. And so it's a little bit all over the map this year, and I think that's had something to do with, the unbelievable change that's taking place, the plate tectonics that are shifting in college basketball, and I think that's part of it. The coaches, obviously, this is probably the unanimous decision in all of the decisions that I've seen in the polling. Dayton is the number one team in the Atlantic 10 this year. Dayton Flyers are very, very solidly coached. They have a really, really good program. And I'm talking about program integrity a lot on this show. I think Dayton, with their coach, has done a good job of maintaining program integrity because they've brought in some really, really good players to that program. They've had some NBA caliber and some really, really solid players that have come into that program, and they've maintained. Those players are back. They're ready to contest, and they're ready to go. This just popped into my head, Pete, so for 1 second I want to go back to it. I think Florida Atlantic is one of the teams that's coming into play in that foursome in Springfield. The team that went to the Final Four last year, and they returned just about everybody, including the big guy, Vlad Golden. So I think I'm pretty sure that they're one of the teams that's in. But let's keep rolling with the poll. St. Louis picked number 2. I think Travis Ford is a very, very good coach. I think that what happens sometimes when you're younger, you get put in a place where probably they jumped a little too quickly for you. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. He was the head coach at UMass. Did a very, very good job. Where they jumped him to, I believe, was LSU. And that became problematic. And I'm not sure it was LSU, but I think it might have been. And it was difficult there. Those jobs are unbelievably difficult jobs, and they contain a whole different metric than the job that you just had in a lot of different ways. And so now he came back to St. Louis. I've watched his teams play. They play with good basketball integrity. They share the basketball. He's had some really good success stories at St. Louis. And so I think if coaches are looking or athletic directors are looking for that next coach who might be ready to come back up to that top level and have been there and maybe done well or not done so well, but now maybe took a step back and is ready for another shot, I would put Travis Ford at one of the tops of that list. Now, this is a team that is all over the polling place. This is VCU. They've been listed, right now they're listed in this poll, and this is the coaches' poll, they're listed as third. And I've seen them listed way, way, way down there as well, in areas where VCU fans have never seen their team in a really, really long time, since Shaka Smart was the coach. Again, a team that has a lot in flux, a lot of movement, a lot of shaking. So we'll have to see how it all turns out. But they're certainly not the top dog in the A10 like they used to be. Certainly that's changed. Loyola Chicago, number 4. Since they lost Porter Moser to Oklahoma, Porter Moser hasn't really knocked it out of the park at Oklahoma, and Loyola Chicago certainly hasn't returned to the Sister Jean days where they had the Final Four going and all that really good stuff when they made that run with Porter Moser. So sometimes it's the coaching carousel not only will eliminate one job, but sometimes it'll take out 2 jobs. And what happened is Porter Moser went over to Oklahoma, very well compensated, very well resourced program. And then left behind a program where he's doing extremely well and had the whole nation was watching his program at that moment. So maybe, you feel like you can't duplicate that or you can't replicate that en masse, and he might have been right about that, and certainly the contract at Oklahoma pays a lot of bills. But right now, that program's in a little bit of flux. 4 is as high as I've seen them listed, but let's see how it goes. George Mason, number 5, picked here. I think that's way too high for George Mason right now. Just lost their coach. Brought in a new coach, Tony Skinn, who has never coached before in his life. I hope he does well. Steve Curran from St. Bonaventure joined him, so I think that's going to add some bench strength to that. But I think picking them is high based upon the fact that Kim English, who went to Providence, took a couple of the players on that team with him. I think that 5's way too high for them. But we'll see. we'll see. Davidson picked sixth. This is another program that's having some difficulty in the new world. This is another program that had Bob McKillop, had this with Steph Curry and some other great players that have played at Davidson, and a great basketball system implemented by Coach McKillop. Coach McKillop had been there many, many years and was really an icon in the community, and had the job turned over to his son. And right now, I've seen them upside down in a lot of polls as well too. Time will determine, but certainly they have not competed at the level of excellence that they had been, and that's telling. So now we move on to number 7, Richmond. Coach Mooney had some heart problems last year. Coaching business is rigorous. The travel at the Division I level, the amount of appearances that have to be made with the class of 1958, and other appearances that have to be made at the Boys and Girls Club and some of the other places. It's very, very rigorous. And so, Skip Prosser, God rest his soul, was a young coach who had a very promising career, and came home from a recruiting trip and put on his shoes to go running, and suddenly passed away, which was a big shock to the basketball world. But he was a great man too, and sometimes the stress of everything can really, really impact your health if you're not careful. And Coach Mooney, we wish him the best. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with him this year. I haven't heard a lot as far as that goes, but last year, in part of the season, he wasn't able to continue, and we're hopeful that he makes it back to the sidelines, because he's a class gentleman and a really good basketball coach as well. A little surprised that some of the upper level colleges haven't knocked on his door a little bit to see if he was interested in moving up, because he's done a very good job at Richmond, and he's done it with class and dignity. UMass pick number 8. I know all the fans, the Minuteman fans, have been waiting patiently or impatiently, depending upon which side of the arena you sit on. But this is something I talked about with a friend of mine as well. In the Atlantic 10, UMass has by far, I would say, the largest student population of any of the schools in the Atlantic 10. I would say it's by far. They're in the 30,000 range as far as their students are concerned. St. Bonaventure taps out at 2,500. And so the discrepancy there is amazing. What always kind of puzzled me was, why don't more students go to the basketball games at UMass? I could never really get my arms around that. Maybe they play the same night as some of the things that are going on here. My friend and I talked about, why wouldn't they try some Friday night games? Because there are advantages to not playing on Saturday. Here's 2 of them for UMass, and you might want to jump on some of this if you like. Number 1 is, you're gonna maybe get better TV coverage because nobody else really plays on Friday night. And so if ESPN's looking for a basketball game to put on Friday night, or to fill a slot on Friday night with a good basketball game, you might have a better chance if you start playing some of your games on Friday night instead of Saturday. Here's where you're really going to get some impact. The big problem is the referees on Saturday. There are so many games all over the place. Every single college is playing on Saturday afternoon. That includes Division I, II, and III. You have a pool of referees that gets stretched really, really thin, just even based on sheer numbers. They run out of enough referees to cover all of the games. You play on Friday night, you're going to get a good referee crew every single time. You play on Friday night, you're going to get a good refereeing crew because it's not diluted. So that's just some advice for the boys over there at UMass. I'm interested to see what happens with their team. They brought in some nice transfers, some good pieces. We'll see what happens. Coach Martin is certainly in his second year, and comes from well-credentialed South Carolina Gamecock program. And I think the fans are excited, and let's see if they can move a little bit. 8th isn't going to really get the base excited right now, though. Rhode Island at 9. I'm a little surprised here. Coach Miller, I think they struggled a little bit last year, and I don't see what everybody's saying about the jump here. Maybe there are some things that have been, included, but every one of these teams is having trouble maintaining their roster. And so when you see people jump, you say maybe they're just jumping because everybody else is moving down. Maybe they're just moving up because everybody else is falling like a rock. That might be part of the piece here with Rhode Island. I know URI fans don't want to hear that, but honestly, There's just the middle pack of all of these leagues are just carnivoring themselves right now, and it's difficult to watch them get eaten from above, within, and below. It's incredible right now, and so one of the last places that I think you want to be as a basketball coach right now is in the Division I area, is in the mid-major area, because
Yeah.
everybody wants your players. Okay,
If you happen to do a really good recruiting job, they're just going to poach them.
oh man, they'll be calling them in the dorms.
Yeah.
They'll be having those calls made. It's happened already. We talked about it. St. Bonaventure, one of the biggest hits. They had 5 starters returning, and all 5 starters went to other schools and took NIL deals. There it was right there for you. The day that happened, you would think that the NCAA would want to help. The day that happened to St. Bonaventure's basketball program, you would think the NCAA would say, wow, I think we have a fairness issue here. Wow, I think we have an equity issue here. Wow, I think that's borderline fraud and discrimination almost.
Yep.
From what you're promoting and what you're saying you have, you don't really have that. And so St. Bonaventure picked 10th. I saw them pick 2nd as well. So I said to one of my friends, would you add 2 and 10 together and take 6? And they're pretty much of the mindset that they would take 6. Although at Bonner territory, we always prefer the higher end, because we will make any place we go Bonner territory. You're going to see it when they come to Springfield. Believe me, they'll be there. And you'll know who they are because they'll be wearing brown and they'll be wearing white.
By the way, I have the info that you were looking for. There you go. Hall of Fame Classic.
There it is.
Saturday, December 16th, UMass versus West Virginia.
Wow.
And Florida Atlantic versus the Bonnies.
Dusty May and Florida Atlantic coming in to play my Bonnies. I love it. And that UMass West Virginia game is another really good game. Hey, whoever put that together, if that's the Hall of Fame, whoever did it,
That's the Hall of
this
Fame.
is the birthplace of basketball. It's one of the reasons I was so excited to move up here from New York, is because if Springfield is the birthplace of basketball, well, the rest of its life was spent in New York, because that's where the game grew up. But to be very honest with you, I think Springfield has a huge, huge role to play in the entire basketball sphere. And I'll tell you a quick funny story. I actually was going to a game at Springfield College, and I saw Naismith's grandson.
Ooh.
And he was walking around with the original rules of basketball
No kidding.
in a briefcase. I said, you know where you are? I said, how much is this worth? He says, it's uninsurable. It's like, a fine. The insurance companies are having a tough time appraising it because it's uninsurable. I said, well, it has to be in the millions. And here we are just walking around with it in a glass case. But I actually got to see the original rules of basketball with Naismith's grandson at Springfield College.
Amazing.
That was actually very cool.
Amazing.
Yep. And so now we go to Fordham, picked 11th. The Rams had a nice run, had a good season last year. And I'm a little bit surprised to say that, they were very, very strong last year. They're not the typical Fordham team you see at the bottom of the A-10 for years. You look to the bottom of the A-10 standings, you could guarantee you're going to see the Fordham Rams there. Last year, new coach, I thought they did a great job and posted a great record despite having a strength of schedule that was a terrible strength of schedule. The NCAA recognized that when they didn't include them in the NCAA tournament as an at-large bid. But they had a great year, and now to see them down here, I don't know. I think that they're probably, a little higher than that. Number 12, George Washington, the Colonials. We're going to see. They've had some losses. They've had some additions. But we're going to see with them as well. 12th, I've seen them picked higher. So, again, they're a team that seems to be a little volatile as far as their picking order. St. Joe's, LaSalle, and Duquesne down at 13. It doesn't look like it's going to be a great year in Pennsylvania. So we have out in the Pittsburgh area, the Duquesne Dukes picked 15th. Wow, I'd be surprised if they finished 15th. I just would. 14th, LaSalle. Wow, that's Speedy Morris, Lionel Simmons, the freight train Lionel Simmons, Doug Overton, top 25 team when LaSalle was there. and watch them really, really struggle at the bottom of the A10 is just telling. St. Joseph's right there. Coach Martelli had a perfect season with St. Joseph's, an absolute perfect season. They went undefeated, and I just am shocked to see where they're at in the A10. Deron Holmes is back. He'll be a big NBA pick for us next year. We thought he should have been picked this year, stayed in, but Deron Holmes is back, and the A10 has some other really good players. Dayton's solid, but again, anybody who wants to get out and watch those 2 basketball games in Springfield, you're going to see some really good basketball. I'm excited about that. All right, so let's jump to our top coaches made by me, and we will conclude with Goodman's top 25. Okay, so I wanted to take the high school coaches first, because there's just this is something I want to say also, and it's a Springfield thing. But I want to just make a point, and this is an in the zone point. All right, the greatest basketball coach that I have ever been around. Okay, and I've been around, had dinner with Mike Krzyzewski. I met Dean Smith. I knew Roy Williams when he was an assistant coach at North Carolina. I've been around some really good basketball coaches in my life. I've met and saw Pete Carril at a basketball clinic. I've watched his games. I prepared scouting reports for the Princeton Tigers. The best basketball coach that I've ever been around is a gentleman who's now in heaven, basketball heaven, but his name is Jack Curran, and he was the head basketball coach at Archbishop Molloy for many, many years. And the reason that I bring this up in conjunction with Springfield is Coach Curran belongs in the Springfield Hall of Fame. His basketball record, his contributions to the game, it's a blight, it's an eyesore on the Hall of Fame, the Basketball Hall of Fame, that you don't have Jack Curran in there. The 2 contemporaries of Coach Curran that I'm going to mention in a second, Coach Bobby Hurley and Coach Morgan Wooten, are both in the Basketball Hall of Fame, and they would both tell you, if they could, that Jack Curran belongs in the Basketball Hall of Fame. So I'm going to start off my all-time high school coaches with my guy, Jack Curran. Hall of Fame people, I know you have that big secret thing that goes on down there where it's easier to find out when the Pope is done than to find out the incoming class, and everything's so secretive and hush-hush. Well, let me put you onto a little secret. Jack Curran belongs in the Hall of Fame, and you guys should get it done. All right. Bobby Hurley, senior, I have him listed as number 2, all-time high school coaches. One of the toughest guys I've ever seen in between the lines, and his teams reflected that. His teams played very hard, very tough. I thought one of the most compelling answers to an interview question I ever heard was from his son, Bobby, and they were trying to poke the bear a little bit with him and his brother Danny about how tough Dad was, and oh my God, it must have been so hard to get thrown out of practice by your dad. Oh my God, it must have been so difficult to play for a tyrant like that. And Bobby Hurley stopped the interviewer, turned around and said, some guys get to go to Stockton State and some guys get to go to Duke. And he goes, I'm the guy that got to go to Duke because of Bob Hurley Sr. So he's in my number 2 hole. And I've been around that gentleman, and I have great respect for him. And I thought, if there's other high school coaches out there, emulate Bob Hurley Sr., emulate Jack Curran, because those 2 guys are my 1 and 2. Number 3, I got Morgan Wooten. A lot of people would have him as number 1. Great coach, great person. Really, really was able to market himself as a high school coach, almost like a college coach could. Another gentleman like Coach Curran, who was offered Division I jobs and stayed put at the Catholic high schools where they were. And if you name those 3 gentlemen right there, those gentlemen were key components, and Bobby Hurley especially, of absolutely keeping those institutions open. The high schools open. St. Anthony's closes many, many years ago without the help of Bob Hurley. Archbishop Molloy, when they would look to raise money, the first phone call they would make was to Jack Curran, their basketball coach, to see what contacts he could reach to raise money. And I could tell you, they were right when they contacted him because he had the right Rolodex. They called him the King of Queens for a reason. Jack Foley, I'm going to go number 4. This is a name some people in Massachusetts might know. He was a great coach in Shrewsbury, St. John's. I love the guy. Recruited his players when I was at Colgate, and just an outstanding basketball coach and a real steward of the game as well.
A lot of the coaches at St. John's are that's an outstanding athletic program.
They do it right.
Yep.
The Catholic schools have really produced some outstanding athletics programs. They're to be commended for that. Vito Montelli, another Catholic school, St. Joseph, Connecticut. Vito Montelli was about as close as you could to a mob boss as he was, who runs a basketball program. The referees adored him. Everybody loved him. When you went into his gym, you weren't going to get it. You didn't have a great chance because he was a great coach, but you didn't have a great chance either because his name was Vito Montelli. There's an interesting story. I'll tell it quickly. Coach Curran, at the end of his career, went up and played against Coach Montelli's team, and it was this great. They did a thing I believe on ESPN or some other places about the game because both gentlemen had coached for like 50 years at the same school, and they hadn't played against each other, I didn't think, and they went up there and they played a game. Now, Jack Curran is a gentleman who attended church every single day of his life, and the time that I was with him, I don't remember him. For the years that I was with him, I don't remember ever any referee having the nerve to give him a technical foul. I don't remember any referee that I've seen his games after that, and I talked to the athletic director there, and so we went way back. Tom Konchalski was the HSBI guru from 5-Star. We asked Tom, when was the last time Coach had a technical foul? And he went, oh my God, that's And Tom Konchalski probably could tell you the absolute day and the referee that gave him the technical foul, but nobody could remember for like 10, 15 years in Queens anybody who had given this guy a technical foul. Now he goes up to play Vito's team, and he's going, and all of a sudden his team gets up there, and they're playing, and they're going back and forth. Something happened in the game, and I don't know who this guy was, but he gives Jack Curran a technical foul. And Jack Curran gets up, and rather than say anything to the referee, he turns, looks down the sideline, and goes, Vito, what is this? That's the God's honest truth. So, Vito, I got you in the 5-hole. I'm going to go with Connecticut as well because this is Bobby Hurley in the Connecticut version. Ken Smith from Windsor High School. Unbelievable guy. A great coach. Ron Niclario, Queens Cardoza. I'm going to go and put these two together. Jerry Houston, my high school coach, and Larry Burns, my first high school coach, before I got thrown out of that high school. And those are the two guys I want to put in this area. Larry Burns is a New York State Hall of Famer and has coached. We talked about him on the show, but Jerry Houston had the New York City schoolboy scoring record for many years and was a great coach and a mentor of mine, one of the reasons I'm a coach right now. In the 10-hole, I'm going to go at Warren Rutledge from Virginia. Episcopal High School in Virginia. All right, so if we're going to have to run through these quick, all right? My number one college coach, I'm going to go with Petey Carrill, Princeton. I love him. People are going to say, Rich, what were the metrics? They're so subjective, Rich. How did you determine this? I'll tell you one thing I did to determine this. I said if I was an athletic director and I had one game and I want one coach that I could pick to coach in this game, this is how I metriced it.
Okay.
Now, obviously, they have great credentials, all of these men. But if I'm picking one guy that I want to get ready in 1 week, my team for an NCAA tournament game or to play to get in a league championship game, Pete Carrill's my number one guy. Of course, you got to go with Coach K, number 2. Mm-hmm. Had the pleasure of meeting him, working at his camp. Everything they say about him was the real deal. Everything they say about him being a genuine person, a guy who would sit with high school coaches and talk and just be very relatable and a very good guy. I remember Coach when he was at West Point as well. So he sent me a recruiting letter that said, your grades are no good, thank you. So that's the God's honest truth, though. I did receive that. One of my friends was played for him, and we had played together in a tournament, and he told Coach K that they should give me a look. And they came down, looked, and we started to talk about basketball, and then they got my grades and said, you're not USMA material, son. So good thing for both of us, I think. Bobby Knight, he's taken teams in one NCAA tournament that nobody on this list could take and win an NCAA tournament game, and not let alone a national title game. Unbelievable coach. Great. Obviously, the theatrics and all the stuff that he'll be remembered for. But there's a really lot of good stuff he did, too. One of his players had a really bad accident, Landon Turner, and Coach did a great job in helping him. I believe he was a quadriplegic after the accident and devastated his life. He was a great basketball player. And the things that Coach Knight did you ask Landon Turner about him and see what he says. Rick Pitino I have in the number 4 hole. St. John's got themselves a gem. What I'm going to do right quick after this is we're going to go in and we're going to give you the guys that are in the game. This is everybody. And Rick's number 4. Dean Smith, number 5. John Thompson, number 6. Dean Smith at North Carolina. John Thompson, the towel over the shoulder. Allen Iverson, Patrick Ewing, the whole bag. Georgetown, he was an icon in college basketball.
Yep.
Bill Self I have at 7. I love Bill Self from Kansas. And he's a great coach, and his players have done great things in the NBA. Jim Calhoun, you have to include him. You have to include him because of what he could do with a team and how he could get them on a run. When one of his teams went on a run, they were just about unbeatable. And you saw that in their national championship runs. You take Bobby Knight and say he won the national title with a team that most people couldn't have done. You go look at some of Calhoun's teams that he won the national title with, and you'll say the same exact thing. The more talented Calhoun's teams were, the less they performed. It was interesting. You can look that up. Roy Williams, 9. From North Carolina. Tom Izzo, number 10. And I wanted to throw this in there because it's number 11. I love this guy, Jay Wright. What class? He probably belongs up on this list somewhere else. But 11, I just wanted to create that for Coach Wright. All right, so here are my current guys, and I'm going to go through them real quick. Number 1, top of the heap, Rick Pitino. Number 2, Bill Self. Number 3, Tommy Izzo out at Michigan State. Number 4, I'm going to go Mark Few. I'm going to surprise some people maybe with that pick. I'm going to go Mark Few right now. Hasn't won the national title, but if you were coaching Gonzaga, you wouldn't win the national title either. Kelvin Sampson, Houston, done a great job. His defense right now is number 1 in the nation, the way they're teaching defense. If you're a young coach and you want to learn how to teach defense, what you should be telling your players to do on defense, watch Kelvin Sampson's Houston team. Rick Barnes, number 6. He's been at Providence. He's been at Texas. He's been at Tennessee. He knows how to run a high major program. He's got Tennessee pointed in the right direction. You've ran 3 big-time programs. I just think, when you add it all up with him, and a class guy, too. So I think he's represented well. Tony Bennett from the University of Virginia. I have him next. Mick Cronin at UCLA. Didn't like him when he was at Cincinnati that much, but I think he's grown as a coach. I think he's really, really improved. And UCLA, you watch their stuff now, I think they do a good job. Randy Bennett from St. Mary's, I'm going to put him on the list. A lot of people don't even know his name. Look up his record. Look at what he's done in St. Mary's little gym out in Moraga, California. I've been in that gym. It's not exactly the Palestra. It's not exactly some of the great basketball arenas, but boy, do they get a great crowd. And this gentleman can really coach. Love this guy. I got Greg McDermott at Creighton, number 10. What I'm going to say about Coach McDermott, I said it before in the show, I think he's probably the brightest basketball mind in the game right now. All right, Pete, are you ready for Goodman's Top 25?
There we go.
All right, let me just run through my top NBA coaches of all time. Red Holtzman, Larry Brown, Pat Riley, Phil Jackson, Jack Ramsey, Jerry Sloan, Chuck Daly, Lenny Wilkins. I love this guy. Al Attles, he was tough. And Doug Moe. And the reason I put Doug Moe in the 10th hole is because he has the greatest line of any coach after being fired. The Denver Nuggets let Coach Moe go, and Coach Moe's quote was, "Here today, gone to Maui." And he took off for Hawaii, never to be seen again. But he had one of the best offensive systems in the entire NBA. Offensively, they were incredible. The amount of points they scored, the way they got up and down the floor. All right, Pete, we've been promising it. Let's go. Goodman's top 25. Goodman likes Kansas Everybody likes Kansas. I think they think that Dickinson is gonna really tilt the paradigm there. I'm a Duke guy, number one right now. I've talked about that on the show. I'm Duke, but Kansas is second. Kansas is a close second, no question about it. I think what we've talked about a little bit on the show is some of the resurgence of the big man coming back in college basketball. I think you're going to see that. So if you have Dickinson going in at number one, in that number one spot for Kansas, you have Kyle Filipowski at Duke, who I'm really excited about to watch his game and see if he's enhanced and improved his game over the year. Local fans have Donovan Clingan at UConn, and I think he's going to have a monster year as well, too. So those three gentlemen I'm really poised to look at this year. I think they're going to be dominant. Throw in Zach Edey, 7'4", 255 pounds. I think you got a nice little Mount Rushmore there of this year's big men that I think are going to be factoring into the game significantly. All right, Michigan State. I love this graphic, Pete. This is like beautiful. So we're in Michigan State. Tom Izzo. He's program integrity guy. He's also let me select the players that I want. Recently signed Kurt Tang out of New Hampshire, and I think they're going to really enjoy him. One of the things about Coach Izzo as well, you young coaches, his game prep is the best in the business. There's nobody that can game prep as well as Tom Izzo. Houston. I think this is a tiny bit high for Houston, and I'm going to say for one reason. A, they've had a lot of their players, Marcus Sasser and Jerace Walker, left as a freshman, enter into the pros. I don't think that's a big problem for Kelvin Sampson, really, because he's lost some other players as well in previous years. I don't see that as being a big problem. What I do see being a little bit of a problem, and I think Coach knows this, is I think Houston's playing in the Big 12 this year. And if they're playing in the Big 12, that's a little different from where they've been in past years. And you look at some of the road trips that you have to take in that conference, that can be unbelievable. So does Houston have the talent to hang in that league with some of the really, really thoroughbred teams in the top 25? I don't know. And when you see them back to back to back to back, it can really beat on your team. So it's going to be a challenge for Coach. I think he's the right guy for that job. I wouldn't want to put too many other guys in there. There's our Florida Atlantic right there. The Bonnies are going to grab them. Dusty May has to be the hottest young coach in the business right now. Dusty May has to be the hottest young coach in the business right now. His defense is terrific. The way they play on offense and share the basketball is great. And some of the players that they have have recruited them to Florida Atlantic, maintained them, improved them, and really, really developed them into the great team and players that they are right now. Really pretty exciting. I think they're going to be okay, FAU. You wouldn't want to sleep on them. I'll tell you that right now.
Is that a good pick at number 5?
I think they're deserving of it. They played in the Final Four last year.
Okay.
Now, this team, I think, is going to have a Virginia rebound. We talked about this a little bit. Virginia lost to UMBC as a 16, and then they went on and won the national title the last year. I think that could happen with the FDU Purdue reverb, but I'm going to say this honestly to all of you Boilermaker fans out there. You got to show that you can get deeper into the tournament. You got to show when it's prime time that you're going to be able to take that team on that run, because too many times under Coach Painter's regime here, they've fallen. And now you got to buckle up and you got to go. They're in the Big Ten, and it's a difficult conference as well. But I think they're well suited right now. I think they're well suited to make that run. To have them right there at 6, yeah, that's okay. Creighton, love them. Really love them. People in the area will be excited to know Derek Kellogg, the former UMass coach, former UMass player, has joined the Creighton staff as an assistant coach. I think Coach Kellogg really knows the business well. I think he'll do a great job out there. Love Greg McDermott. Love what they're doing out there, especially since there's not really one basketball player of Division I level talent within miles of Omaha, Nebraska.
Hey, Coach, I got a Derek Kellogg story for you.
Go.
Back when we were all in grade school, we all played Park and Rec together, and I played on a summer league with Kellogg and Travis Best.
Wow.
At Forest Park.
Oh my God.
Yep.
One of the first times I was in the Springfield area, I came to see Travis Best in the McDonald's All-American game.
Yep.
He was something.
Yeah, we used to play in the Park and Rec team league, and he was on the team Jones Realty, and that was your designated loss every time you came up against them.
That's funny. Let me tell you something else too. You look at the Georgia Tech point guards during that time. They had my guy Kenny Anderson, who was unbelievable point guard out of New York, the best of all time in New York City, the best point guard in New York City history. Then they had Marbury, and then Travis Best as well in that whole time. I think Travis came after Kenny, and then Marbury came after that. But those 3 point guards in Georgia Tech history, Bobby Cremins made a little bit of point guard you right there with that run and did a really, really good job with that. Okay, Connecticut. When you have Carabas and you have Klingon back, I think you could be a little bit some people might say that's optimistic, only based upon it's tough to come back after a national title, but also it's tough to come back after a national title without Adamo Sanogo and some of the other pieces that they had. And so I think they're pretty well stocked up front, though. I think they're okay. And Coach Hurley, I think, he's the most improved basketball coach in the country, if you ask me.
Wow.
Marquette, Shaka. Without Prosper, if they can keep that level of basketball right there, that's hats off to Marquette and Coach Smart and their program. But old days with Al McGuire and some great players. They had Butch Lee. They had some really, really good New York City players there. Bernard Toone. They had some great players at Marquette back in the day. And, of course, the legendary coach Al McGuire. But that's a basketball place. They're really, really excited about basketball out there in Wisconsin. And Marquette and Wisconsin over the years have done extraordinarily well. There's my guy St. Mary's. Wow. I had no idea they'd pick him this high. But that's why I like him. Coach Bennett, I really, really like this guy. And this is going to really, really create some stir back home. But to see them picked over Gonzaga is really, really going to create a backyard situation there. Those 2 teams are in the same league. They play each other, and this is going to heat things up tremendously. Got to love that. To see those 2 teams back-to-back, you got to love it. And those are 2 great coaches. So if you're going to have to stay up late to watch a game, stay up late to watch the Gonzaga-St. Mary's game. You really, really enjoy it. North Carolina. Ain't nothing finer than North Carolina, except when they're listed this low. The Tar Heel Nation is now in despair. The fact that Duke is picked number 1 or 2 and they're not is absolutely devastating to them. And Coach is going to have his work cut out for him. Hubert Davis is going to have his work cut out for him here. They're not getting the same caliber of recruit, certainly that Duke is getting, and they've fallen off because the level of recruiting that's going on there right now. Armando Baycoat stayed around. R.J. Davis stayed around. Those are some of the guys that are in the program that Baycoat certainly could have probably gotten drafted. He decided to stay around. If those gentlemen aren't in the program right now, especially Baycoat, where are you? North Carolina is not even in the top 25 without Armando Baycoat on their team. Arkansas, if Musselman can keep this thing together like that, God, that is some feat because they lost 4 players that got drafted last year. And if you can recalibrate and reload like that going into the conference that they're in, then they're paying him a lot of money, but I think he's probably worth it. The Miami Hurricanes, Coach Larinaga. And I think that the loss of Wong will hurt, but I think they have a very good base coming back. They have Ormir. They have Pack. I think they're solid. I think they'll be well coached. I think that's a good position for them. San Diego State, another team that made that amazing run last year. Maybe it's the weather out there in San Diego State, but they had Coach Fisher, who was the Michigan coach for years, went out to San Diego State. And if you look at his record at San Diego State, it's astonishing. And when Coach Fisher left, now they've been able to maintain and to stay at the level that they are. It's got to be the weather because that's not one of your top 25 basketball programs in history by any stretch of the imagination. Tennessee, we alluded to Rick Barnes. They're solid. I bet they're a little higher than that. I think Goodman's got them a little bit too low. Baylor, coach has done a great job out there. They were really, really high. I had them as the top defensive program in the NCAA until Kelvin Sampson came along and knocked them off. For a couple of years there, Baylor had a group that really bought into what they were doing on defense, really, really did a great job. And I thought, wow, they've really eclipsed it as a program. But they seem to have taken a little bit of a step back, but I still see them as solid, and they're going to get some athletes, and they're going to be able to get up and down the floor. And so if they can get them to buy in on defense, that's the trick for them. I don't think they're going to win any games offensively. Colorado, way out there. I feel terrible for the Colorado basketball coach right now because he's done an amazing job, but his office is next to Deion Sanders.
Nobody's knocking on the basketball coach's door.
There's no oxygen going into any other room there than in the amazing job that Coach Prime has done in a very short time he's been at Colorado. A quick story about him. He walks into one of his meetings, and in football, they're very bifurcated about their meetings. Linebackers go to a meeting, quarterbacks go to a meeting, running backs go to a meeting, wide receivers. They all got meetings, and they all go separate places. So he walks in, and one of his groups has their music on, and they're playing music extremely loudly in the meeting. He walks in and goes, "What's going on here?" He says, "Oh, Coach, we always play music at our meeting." He says, "Next time that happens, you're all going to be looking for a new place to play. Turn the music off and get down to business."
Wow.
That's why they're winning. Villanova, everybody in Villanova country everybody would be excited to be in the top picks where they are right there, except everybody in Villanova land. They're having a Jay Wright hangover down there in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia basketball at one time was unbelievable. And to see where the Big Five down there has gone, it's a little staggering to see what's happened down there. And some of the smaller Catholic schools, especially, are going to have trouble competing here in the next couple of years. Alabama, guy's done a fabulous job out there. Coach Oates, he was at Buffalo, not an easy place to win. He goes to Alabama, and Alabama's one of those places where they say, "What's the number one sport at Alabama?" And they say football. And they say, "What's the number two sport at Alabama?" And they say spring football. So to do any kind of winning like they've done at Alabama, again, Coach Oates, I'm going to give him his due. Great defensive teams. He's had some really, really solid defensive teams, and his teams play really hard on both ends of the ball. Texas A&M, Buzz Williams, where he goes, they win. What he does, the program turns around. Great job, and they have resources at Texas A&M to support his coaching acumen. So I think you're going to see good things from them. They had a very good run last year. I think you're going to see good things from them as well. Goodman might have them a little low, I think. USC, they returned some really good guards. Had they been able to, without equivocation, say Bronny James was in the lineup, I think you're going to see USC really, really rise a lot higher than that, because I thought he was an impact player for them and somebody that could really excite things and really turn your program in a different direction. I still think USC is going to be very good, and I'm prayerful that and hopeful that Bronny James can get back into uniform and play. But had that not occurred, I think USC, you see his team a little bit higher up there. He was Florida Gulf Coast when they had that high flying program, and Andy Enfield's a good coach. I'm sure they'll be solid. Seeing Texas here, I think they did a great job last year with that Texas team, despite all of the distractions they had with Chris Beard being let go as the coach, Rodney Terry, the assistant coach, taking over midseason. I thought they waited too long also to name Rodney Terry as the coach after he had shown the great job he did with the team. He had recruited a lot of the players. They allowed him to coach the team as an interim. He displayed a very strong acumen, and I thought Texas kind of wavered on that a little bit and kind of held on that a little bit, and I don't think that was smart. I think Rodney Terry will be a good coach for them for years to come. All right, St. John's Johnnies. I'm going to get the people in Queens excited right now. Up on Queens Boulevard, Luke Carnesecca is jumping up and down like he used to on the sidelines. There's excitement at St. John's. Their recruiting right now has been off the charts. Jaden Glover, a player out of New Jersey they just signed. They've done a really, really good job. But what Rick Pitino really, really does is he is a player development coach. So what I'm excited to see is what happens to Soriano, the transfer that came in from Fordham, under Pitino's direction. 7 foot, he can run, he can do some stuff. I think you're going to see a different type of player. If that's the case, St. John's is going to be in the top 15 before you know it. So I want to get you people out on Queens Boulevard excited. I know Dante's is closed, so Louis has to eat somewhere else, but you guys will get through. Arizona, this is, again, a place where you don't usually see the great Arizona team. you got them all the way down here. They're 25, Pete?
Yep.
Wow. That's about as low as they've been picked since Lute Olson was running the team, and Lute Olson had them in the top 10 consistently. I think it's a great job. It's well-resourced. They changed coaches recently. The young man that came from Gonzaga was an assistant coach at Gonzaga, hadn't coached a lot before in his career as a head coach, and that's an enormous job to turn over, and I think maybe they're bouncing around a little bit as a result of that. So I think we made it, Pete.
Yep.
Got all the way through the top 25. That's Jeff Goodman's top 25. There are others out there that are very, very credible. Borzello does a pretty good one. There's a lot of good ones. But the bottom line is it's just good information that you can take and you can extrapolate and do what you want with and formulate your own plans. I'm sure that there's some people possibly that will be wagering on games during the year, and you want the good information. You want to be able to get good information from people. And so that group of people, Jeff Goodman does a great job. Borzello does a great job. Rothstein, another one does a great job. But what they've all alluded to is we've got about under 50 days until basketball season eclipses.
Yep.
We've got under 50 days for basketball to eclipse, and we're excited about that. That's certainly going to pick up the tenor of our show. But I met a gentleman in the studio previous to this, and this is what happens in life if you let it. Okay? This is what I'm going to say to you. I met a gentleman who just came out and filmed 3 one-hour shows in a row. Mark.
Yep.
Okay? Give him a shout-out, Pete.
Mark Auerbach hosting 2 of the shows on the channel. And he comes in and he back-to-back-to-back 3 one-hour shows.
So he goes back to back to back and has been experiencing some health issues. But when you come in here and you say, wow, we got to get through the hour, we got to do this, and then you see somebody like that, and you see that the fight and determination that they possess, and you see the courage and the integrity that they have, you walk in here, you better up your game. You better pick up your level. You better bring your game up. And I think the Mountain Dew didn't have nothing to do with it. That's just the way I live. That's the way I see Mark living his life. That's what I love about people. You go get it. And no matter what they hand you, no matter what comes your way, you knock it out of the park as best you can. I came in today and I was like, little sleepy maybe. And then all of a sudden I met that gentleman. I said, pick it up. Pick it up. I'll tell that to everybody. When you're in the zone, you pick it up. Raise your level. Everybody could use it. Okay, Pete, I think we're out, right?
We're out.
See you next week, folks.